Yep. We're good? I like that I can see what you guys see over there. Lindsay went to get one more person. We'll wait 30 seconds and we'll get started when she comes. Thank you so much for being here. I'm excited to talk about this. I was struggling with what to put in this PowerPoint because I just had so much. So before I get started, I think that one of the things I want to say is please schedule a coffee date with me because there's going to be so much more to talk about that I just could not all do in 30 to 45 minutes. So the point of this presentation is one, to sort of give you an overview of what happened. I'm going to talk a little bit about the academic side very briefly. I'm going to talk about the hard side, the God part. And I'm going to show a bunch of pictures and share stories. But again, I actually want to sit down with you and talk in detail about some of these things. And right now I'm dragging it out so that Lindsay can work in. Okay, cool. Awesome. There she is.
We'll just have lunch after church someday.
Yes, absolutely. I would be more than willing to talk more about both. If you're more interested in the research side of it or what I heard from God and the trip, I'd be more than happy to sit down and talk more. All right. So this trip was, I guess, a combination of two things. I'm a student at St. Mary's College of Maryland. Many of you guys know it. And something that I researched over the summer was the idea of ecology and status of oral literature, and I'll go deep in that. Status is just a fancy word for what is oral literature like today? What's the contemporary situation today of oral literature? And ecology, in biological terms, usually means how things work with one another in a particular system. So if you think about an area, a particular area, as a network of communications, so we all talk, there are conversations, there are emails. So where do oral literature fit within that big network of communication? So that's really what I mean by ecology. So I wanted to look at a particular, first, oral literature in general, in the context of oral societies, because not all societies are oral of nature, but looking at oral literature in general, but also looking at oral literature in Africa. And then when I got to Africa, I wanted to go a bit deeper. So I went and looked at a particular group of people for a couple of reasons. My mother is Fulbe. I speak the language. So I figured that it'd be very easy, it'd be a lot easier to engage that community if I already spoke the language to a certain extent. And of course, oral literature is huge, so I could not just, in a summer, research all of oral literature, so I had to like go smaller again, so I decided to look at Proverbs. So this is just an outline. So most sub-Saharan countries in Africa are oral societies, which means that, so when we think about oral literature first, let's get this out of the way. It seems like a contradictory phrase, right? Oral literature. Literature is meant to be written, but you're saying this is oral literature. How does that work? Well, there's a difference between writing and literature. If you write your name on a piece of paper, it's not literature, it's writing. Literature has something more to it. It has form, it has content, and most of all, it is designed to be consumed. It is designed for someone. If someone writes a piece of literature, it's generally so that they can read it, or so that somebody else can read it. It's not just something that you're scribbling on a piece of paper. Now think about, in your mind, all the differences between writing and literature, in your mind. Just things that you would just write and things that you would consider literature. Now take all of those elements that did not fit into writing that you put in the literature section and think about those that are passed on by word of mouth. So that's what oral literature is. All those things that separate writing from literature, but that aren't written. So if the goal is for it to be poetic and rhyming in literature, your writing doesn't have to be poetic and rhyming. So in oral literature, there'll also be that aspect of things that rhyme and things that are poetic. So all those elements that make literature unique, but that are passed on orally. So that's what I mean when I say oral literature. So most sub-Saharan countries in Africa are oral societies, and that's why Africa is a very, very good place to start to look at some of these things. And oral literature, like I said, is a huge part of some of those things, because before colonization and European influence, oral literature is the ways that people pass down knowledge from generation to generation. The Fulbe, the group that I'm going to talk about today, they're also known under Fula and Fulani. So those are called ethnonyms. They're just like synonyms, but for ethnic groups. So if you hear somebody say Fulani or Fula or Fulbe or Fufulde, same group of people. They're an extremely large group. And I don't want to go into details, but some of the things that I wanted you to know is that this is a hierarchical society. So they have a tradition of elders, and it's not necessarily a caste system, but it's hierarchical. So you had back in the you had slave caste, you had nobility, you had a working class, you had custodians of literature. So think about this as a society where everybody is not necessarily welcome to every single social role, right? There are certain social roles that are specific to certain people. They are gerontocratic, and that is a fancy word that just means that old people play a huge role in those societies. So leadership, power, a lot of times will be amongst the elders, right? So you will rarely see a young person that's got influence over an older person. It's usually from older, from older to younger. And of course, it's a patriarchal society, which is suspected in sub-Saharan Africa. So this just means that men you hold a lot of the power. So if we think about those things, hierarchical, gerontocratic, and patriarchal, who is going to be at the top of the pyramid in that society? Older men, right? Okay, cool. This is West Africa, and just to show you how big and how widespread these people are, that's the area. And that area is about the width of the U.S., and the width of the U.S. is the width of the American continent, right? So this goes as west as Senegal at the complete left and as east as Cameroon. So this is a very, very expensive, lots of people and lots of countries in here, lots of countries in this area. Okay? Another thing that I want you to know before the presentation is that these were nomadic pastoralists. So originally they just moved. They just moved and moved and moved, and they, oh boy. Let's pick another time. This is tomorrow. Okay? Cool. They're nomadic pastoralists. So they moved from places to places with their cattle. And this is going to be very important a bit later. But let's keep going. When we look at this map, this is the same area that I showed earlier. This shows, every single color shows a different variation of Fulbe culture in Africa. And the fact that they were nomadic pastoralists explains that, right? So if you have an area that has different people that live in it, and you have a particular group that are nomadic pastoralists, they're going to settle in different areas. And in every single area that they settle, they're going to mingle with different people. They're going to mix with different people. So you're going to have different permutations of culture, right? So in that entire area, a big misconception is to think that all Fulbe are the same, or they speak with the same accent, or they have the same value. But as you can see from this map, it is extremely, extremely diverse, right? So they're the same people and they may share a language, but they have a lot. Just like the US, you talk to somebody in the East Coast, you might have a fully different experience in the Midwest or on the West Coast. The area that I focused on is that area right there in red. And that area is called the Futa Jalon. And one of the reasons why I picked this particular area is because, one, my mother is from that area, and I speak the language, as I said, but also for a different reason. The Fulbe, as I said, were nomadic pastoralists. So if you have a nomadic group that move into an area and settle there, chances are they're going to be, what do you think, majorities or minorities? They're going to be minorities, right? Because they're coming and they're settling, small groups. But in this particular area, surprisingly, they are a majority. So this is huge to think that in a country where you have a nomadic pastoralist group that came and settled, that they eventually became the majority. So this is huge, huge, huge in academia, because imagine the richness that you can get from that place. Because in every other place, it's been mixed and it's been lost, but in this place, they're bigger. And Guinea, in blue, happens to be a country that encompasses that entire region. So another place where I'm lucky. My mother is from Guinea. I have access to Guinea. I've been there a couple of times visiting my grandparents. So that entire region happens to be in that one country. So I'm lucky that by going to that country, I have access to a complete region that is worldwide known for its richness, and it's in this one country. So I didn't have to go to 3, 4, 5 different countries just to talk to these. It's all compressed in one place. All right, next. They're Muslims. That is as different as they is a form of demon possession in Africa. He says that he wasn't crazy. He says that he was possessed. He admits to that. And that Jesus delivered him of that. Guess what I got to do with this guy before I left? A couple times. We went and prayed for schizophrenic people. But they weren't, right? Because he had the testimony of deliverance from that. So I went and ministered with him. 3 times. It was wonderful. I had coffee and tea in this very, very humble abode. It's smaller than a third of my room. But this was huge to me. I think I cried about this for days. Because I went over there anxious. How am I going to be able to do everything that I needed to do? This rain, it's not just when you tell people I couldn't make it to the appointment because of rain, people are like, excuse. But you saw the kind of rain that there was. So I was like, how am I going to do this? This was the Lord telling me, boy, I got you. Stuff is happening. It gets better. 2 days later, 2 days later, I'm on the phone with this lady right here, Lindsay, and it's Jay Patterson's, our assistant pastor's son's birthday. So hierarchical society, neighborhoods are very, very different. There are some neighborhoods that are very, very well built, amazing houses, way better than anything I've seen here. And then neighborhoods where you're like, oh my God, I'm afraid for my life. Where do you go when you want good cell phone connection? Good neighborhoods, right? Because they're going to have better towers or whatever. So I was driving to one of those neighborhoods so that I could contact home. Because I think I spoke twice, I think my entire trip, 2 or 3 times, I was able to actually connect. This was one of those days before I went to the countryside where I was like, okay. So I'm driving and I'm telling Lindsay, all right, I'm gonna go to a place because the connection is not bad. I'm gonna park here because the connection is getting better. And we're talking, and I tell her, Lindsay, I gotta go. There's a car on fire next to me, right? Well, what had happened was my cousin had noticed when I was talking to Lindsay and I was updating Lindsay and Pastor Jay that there was lots of smoke coming out of that car. And the driver was asleep and there was a baby in the backseat. So he had waved at him and said, hey, there's something going on with your vehicle. And he said, no, it's okay, it's my radiator. And my cousin, who's very, very pushy, I told Lindsay about this, got up, opened the car, pulled him out, and popped the trunk because he knew that this was not a radiator issue. Well, I got to capture some of it. That's fire, right? Inside. And that's my cousin pouring water on it until it is. Of course, I'm very far away, right? The babies are. But this is unbelievable that I went somewhere to have a conversation with Lindsay and Pastor Jay. I happened to park next to a car that was about to blow up, right? There was fire coming out of there. The guy, of course, thanks us and everything, and he later meets back with me, and it was somebody that was looking into Jesus, and I actually lead him to the Lord, right? I told you guys that story. Not because of this, but he met me, and he wanted me to be with him when he accepted the Lord. So this is a long-lasting relationship that I have now. And of course, I think it would have been, oh my God. Anyways. All right, transportation. It's hard, right? This is day-to-day transportation for a lot of people that can't afford it. This is not a joke. So you have normal taxi price, and then you have a cheaper price for people that can hop on like that. Can you think about reckless situations that this could cause? Accidents? Let's look at that one. This guy's going on a long trip. This was on my 2-day trip to the inside of the country. Keep in mind the rain. Some people travel 2 days on top of a vehicle like that. Right? Lots of accidents. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to share this portion. But I think I'll share one. And some of you guys, I think, that have met me for coffee, have heard it already. On one evening, I'm driving down the road with my cousin, and there's an accident. Someone like that has fallen, and he has been hit, right? There's blood everywhere. This guy is dying before our eyes, but no one wanted to put him in their vehicle because they've grown so desensitized from this. Happens all the time. And a lot of the people that are driving cars there, a lot of times they don't own those cars. They're drivers, they're hired drivers. And they do not want to put a bloody mess in their boss's car because they're going to get fired. So a lot of times they let people die. So I'm there, and of course this guy is about to lose his life. So we put him in the car, and we're rushing to the hospital. And one occasion he made it, one guy made it, and another occasion, and I'm not going to get into specifics. If you want to hear more about it, someone died in my arms. I can't explain it when you're there with someone and they're leaving, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it but pray, right? So I got to tell someone briefly about Jesus in the last couple of minutes as he was being thankful that I allowed him in my vehicle the entire time. That was his heart. It was a heart of thankfulness. The entire time, he's just like, I can't believe your leather seats, man. Oh my God, like, why did you? That was his thing. And I think Jesus got him. Because when you go like that, recognizing the provision that the Lord has put in front of you and sort of opening your heart and thinking, I think that in a way that was him accepting what the Lord had put in his path. He didn't make it. He died in my arms. That has never happened to me before. I cried for days. There's just, you see that last breath, and it's, I really think that I grew a lot. So provision became an issue because this car that I was driving in was my mother's car. And of course, my mom needed the car after a while. And I had budgeted for car rental in my fundraising process. But when I got over there, things were a bit different, right? The rates were a lot higher per day. They found out that I was going to the countryside and not just driving in the city where the roads are worse. So the rates went up. And what they didn't say in the website was that you're supposed to hire their driver, right? That's in the fine print. You may rent our car, but you may not take it by yourself. You also have to hire our driver here for $100 a day, right? Not happening. I don't have the money. I'm trying to figure out how I'm even going to make it. There's no way I can do that. So now I have an issue. By this point, I've done all the academic things that I need to do in the city, and I'm just trying to find a way to the countryside. And I can't get there. So let me tell you the story of this car. So on my way home one evening, this car is parked at one of my grandparents' neighbors. It's parked there. So I come up to him and I'm like, well, this looks like this is a Land Cruiser. This is a very good car for going inside. Let me talk to this guy and see if we can figure something out. Like, I can't rent anything from a company, but maybe from a neighbor, maybe I can rent. And he comes up and he says, well, I would have let you use this car, but it's broken and I don't have the money to fix it. It's been sitting here for over a year now. I don't have the money to fix it, so it's just sitting here. I'm just saving up. The average salary in Guinea is 500,000 francs a month. That's the median salary. All right, $1 is 9,000 francs. So that translates to a little bit over $40 a month, right? How do you replace your fuel pump if you're making $40 a month and you gotta feed your family and you gotta do everything else? You gotta pay for rent, you gotta eat. It's not gonna happen. So the money that I had that was not enough for renting a vehicle was enough to fix this vehicle and take it. So what God did there, I still don't understand how that worked. So with less money, I was able to not just bless someone. Having a car there is money, it's income. He can rent it, he can use it as a cab, he can do so many things. So I was able to bless this person, and I was blessed, right? So I ended up paying, I think it was $300 or something, the equivalent to $300 or $340 for 2 weeks. Unheard of, that car. And the guy was like, the entire time he didn't want me to change my mind, right? Like up to the day before, like you're still fixing this, right? You're still gonna take it for 2 weeks. It just shows that it was such a situation where no one was taking advantage of no one. Like it was like he was even afraid that I would back down. So that's how the Lord provides vehicle for me. Because I called Lindsay, I was like, I think I'm gonna rent a motorcycle and just take minimum and just go to the countryside and walk from there. It's like, cause I just don't have the money. The Lord provided. So this is right before I left. Stay in the city, spend the next 2.5 weeks in the bushes. It ought to be interesting. I feel at peace. I had some dreams where the Lord, spoke to me very clearly. I'm excited to what I'm going to see there. This is the weapon choice, an older Land Cruiser. Thinking it for you guys, and starting right up. No service anywhere. I don't suspect it'll be any different there, but if you don't see it now, you'll see it when I get there. But anyways, I'm super excited. I feel like people are doing warfare for me over there. I got up and I felt like I had warriors around me. So, thank you. So that's how I felt before I went on a trip where I knew that I would not be able to contact anybody, my family there or here, for the next 2.5 weeks. That night, as I say here, I had lots of dreams, and I was telling Lindsay that I heard prayers. I audibly heard people praying for me. Now, it might have been a figure of my imagination. It might have been the Lord showing me and encouraging me, but I felt like people were praying for me. So I just want to extend that thank you to all of you guys that prayed for me, because in moments where I felt like I had no control, like that was just that extra boost, like, all right, Lord, you still got this, right? So thank you so much. People decided to go with me. Keep in mind, I budgeted for a translator and a driver originally. I didn't meet my goal, so I couldn't afford both. So I sort of had to pick between. So I was able to. My cousin was going to drive me, and I was going to pay him. That was the goal. Eventually, in that trip, what these guys decided to do, which was unbelievable, was take out all the money out of their pocket that I had, the small amount of money that I could give them, and they just put it at the table, and they said, put yours on the table also. We're going to take this trip together. So this was no longer a trip where I was going and I was hiring help. This was a trip where a group of 4 people were going, and these were the resources available to them. So I see a shift from a foreigner that is hiring a group of people to go with them to a family that's saying, all right, how much money we got? Let's go. So this is really cool, right? And it comes in handy later. Oh boy. On my way to my 2 weeks inside, these are the people who decided to embark on the journey with me. My cousin right behind me. one of his friends. This is going to be a long trip. Got there and driving at. So looking forward to the next 1.5 weeks. The countryside is gorgeous. I can't wait to start talking to people. Catch you later. I knew you guys would see this at some point. I couldn't send them on the time off, but I knew that I would show it to them. So this was the atmosphere, and for me that was a blessing. Think about stress Zeidi that worries a lot. Think about that atmosphere. That's me. Anybody who's hung out with me, playful, laughing, joking, that's what the Lord provided. So I'm going into the countryside with a group of guys that I've decided, you're not hiring me. We're interested in this too. We're going together as a family. That guy, Kader, in the back right, also gives his life to the Lord by the end of the trip. We get to that. All right, some cool pictures along the way. That is a sleeping monkey. Tell me that's not the coolest thing you've seen. That monkey was out. It was just sleeping there. And the majority of the scenery is going to be like this from the time on. So I go from a place of dirt and rain and mess to like where the poor people live. And I'm like, can I live where the poor people live? Right? This is what I saw every day. This is it. This is where I stayed first. So I was here for about a week. And then, all right, I started meeting elders. This is really, really cool. When I was raising funds, one of the questions that came up all the time was, well, what's going to make you any different? Like, how do you think that these older men in a hierarchical society are going to want to listen to you and fellowship with you and talk to you? I said, I don't know. The Lord said go, so I'm going to go, right? So my advisor, Bill Roberts, who's the head of the Anthro department at St. Mary's, said, Zeidi, if you can meet with 3 elders, your SMP is going to be a success, like your project. Like if you can meet with 3, because keep in mind, these are elders. They're not just elders. Gerontocratic society, patriarchal society, so they're community leaders. And if they accept the Lord, guess who follows? The village follows, right? So this is very, very, very important. So of course the Lord is talking to me about it. And of course my advisor is saying, you're going to have a hard time. You only have 4 weeks. You might get 2 or 3 elders to kind of for 12 elders. 12 elders. And not just 12 elders. And as I'm telling this story to Pastor Jay, he's telling me all these things that are significant. The devil's pulpit, at some point, he tells me about it. As I'm telling 12 elders, he tells me that that's also very significant. There are lots of things. I didn't think about those aspects, but I met 12 elders. I could not include all of them here and all their stories, so I picked a couple, right? Elijah Usman, he's an imam, Muslim imam, in charge of a congregation of about 400 to 500 people. This guy took me in his home. That's him in the back over there, in the back over there in that picture hanging in Makkah. But in charge of 300 people, took me and asked me to live with him while we were talking. So he said, I don't want you to come here daily and talk to me. I want you to stay with me so that we're partaking meals together. He says, friends talk together, but family eat together. So I got to spend 2 days with this guy in his home, talking, sharing about life, sharing about Christ, right, to a Muslim imam, and realizing that we're not that much different. And some of the things that he cared about were things like families and things like that. And of course we hit some, all right, this is where we disagree. But the point here was not for me to go and Bible thump people. The point for me here was to go and see what the status was of the kingdom of God. So I did not come here to convert anyone. I wanted to see what the Lord was doing. And I realized that a lot of the Christians that have gone to those areas didn't do a very good job. Some of the stories that I've heard over there, so Christians that come and they do works and they build houses and irrigation systems. And when they're ready to leave, they go, well, what? After all this work I did, you don't want to accept Jesus? Bah! And they just, so all the work that they do, It's for something else. So he was telling me that's one of the things I don't like about Christians. They come here and they pretend to do good work, but then at the end of their work, they're very mad when we don't accept Christ. Right? So I took note on that. Because the Fulbe are very, very different, right? The Fulbe, remember provision? All right. So meet me with coffee and I'll tell you more about that. One of the things that the Lord told me about was that he would send me to worship in places of fresh water. I got that word here twice. I heard it myself. While we were here, someone prayed it over me. Someone told me that. And oh boy, he did. And these are the stories that I was referring to. Pastor Jay was talking about the devil's pulpit, where the Lord has sent this man to just pray in particular. I didn't know why the Lord was sending me to these places, but I would drive, and then you'd see amazing things like this hidden away. And people would not want to go there because there were evil spirits in those areas. So people were afraid to go there. And this is one of the things that leads Kader to Christ, is because he does not want to go to those places. You're not supposed to go in those places and go in those waters. But I've heard from the Lord that I need to go over there and worship. So I go over there and I worship, and I come back sane and sound. And he's like, and the next time maybe he comes with me, right? But over the course of the time there, that's what brought him to Christ, is that he's realizing that all these powers that he had felt before somehow didn't affect me or my God. So he said, whoever your God is, I want to follow. So these things, the small, you'll worship in places of fresh water, actually brought someone to Christ because people were afraid of these places of fresh water, right? This is another place. This is really cool. You see what I'm pointing out over there? Ready? You're not ready for this. Oh man, there are lights you can't see. This is unbelievable. Worshipping in those places, I cannot explain to you the spiritual presence when you're worshiping in a place like this. In a place where maybe no one has worshipped before, like that. I just cannot explain to you. So worship was unbelievable. And I have another picture like this where Kader, on the way back after he's accepted Christ, is on there and we're worshiping together. I don't know why I didn't bring it. Second place I lived, in the guest house. Can you guess where the guest house is? The thing on the right there. So I stayed there for about a week. It's very humbling when you're in a place where there's no running water or electricity and you don't worry about your phone. Even if you have your phone, you can connect. For daily water, you have to go to the stream and there was something like I bonded with the Lord a lot in those moments. Like getting up in the morning with my buckets, going down to the stream and getting water that I was going to use. There's just something about like, give us our daily bread. Like literally daily you're seeing the Lord's provision for you. A lot of times we forget about our daily provision because it's always there. All right, another older. Now that building is not just any building. I'm going to go to the next picture. This building is called La Maison des Palabres. La Maison des Palabres means the house of disagreements. That place is a place where elders would come whenever there was a disagreement between leaders. They would go into this place and they would hash it out, and they would come out of there with peace, with full peace. And this old man is in charge of that place. And his father was in charge of that place before him. And his father was in charge of it before him. So they are the generational peacemakers of that place. I got to go over there and talk to generational peacemakers of that place and made peace with them. Again, there was a lot of past hurts about Americans in general, about Europeans in general, about people who speak the French language in general, a lot of hurts. And I got to stand there, I don't know why, but apologizing on behalf of some of the people that came before me. So we made peace. And he wanted a picture of us making peace, house of peace. Elder, remember? So he's going to tell an entire village about this. All right. Another elder, Barry Colon. This guy is not just any elder. I was reading a research book about West Africa before I went. And not until I came back did I realize that this guy's father is in the book. So I'm just figuring this out now. But this is Barry-Colon. He's Labé. Labé is the biggest city in the Fouta Djallon, and he's one of the main imams there. He, well, yes, invited me into his home, and I spent time with his family, but I thought I had a picture with writing. No, I don't. He is one of the people that are inventing a new writing language for Fulfulde people. So, like I said, they were Islamized very early, so what they used to write is the Arabic script. What they're realizing is that one of the things that separated them from growth is not just the French that came, but it was also Islam. And he kept saying, he said 2 or 3 times, he's like, but I'm an al-Hajj, but I'm an al-Hajj, but I'm an al-Hajj. So he kept saying like I'm criticizing Islam right now, but I want you to know I'm a devout Muslim. I'm criticizing it right now, but I'm a devout Muslim. So he just, it seemed like he was nervous. But I so desperately wanted to tell him like, don't worry, like I'm not a Muslim man looking at you that's gonna like question your authority and why you're in power while you're questioning these things. But what they're doing is they're developing a writing script where they can separate themselves from the Arabic script and actually come back to the original Fulfulde script, which I think is a really, really beautiful thing. Not because they're separating themselves from Islam, he keeps saying I'm an al-Hajj, but because this is gonna allow Fulfulde culture to sort of grow independently of Islam. So you'll have, as I said, the one thing that all Fulbes have in common is they're all Muslims. Maybe there'll be people that'll pick a different path now that the way to being literate is not through the Quran, now that there are other ways of being literate outside of the Quran. Who knows? I thought that was really, really cool. So I got there, I stood there with him and I learned the alphabet of his little writing, and it was wonderful. I went to his house. Oh, by the way, something here that I want you to keep note of. You see that thing on his head? Have you noticed that on every single elder so far? What does it mean here when he takes it off in my presence? It's extremely meaningful in Muslim culture. When an old person takes off his kufi, you're comfortable, you're family. You're not a stranger in his house to where he has to be dressed. He's comfortable. So I got to stay at his house for a day or two. And this is his family, and we're just reading and talking. So this is a really good picture. I didn't notice till I got back that he had taken that off. So that's really, really cool. Because I'm going to go back, and I have relationships with these people. All right. On one of my walks, I saw this gem. Guess what this was? Church. This was an old church. This was a church so old that the people there, some of the kids did not remember when it was a church. Like it's always looked like that, right? So we're guessing that it was older than at least 15, 20 years with some of the young people that I'm talking to. A lot of the elders don't know much about it because, like I said, I went out on very long walks. I went there twice. First time I worshiped in unity with the people that came before us, and the Lord sort of was putting on my heart that I was not alone, that there were people that came before me to those areas for the purposes of the Lord, and I rejoiced for that. And the second time that I went it was sort of a downer day, so I was like, all right, I'm going to go back there and sort of worship with the people that came before me. That's not the sentiment that I felt. I felt hatred and shame and all the bad things that some of the Christians had also represented to that culture. The Lord made me feel that. Because a church being there, unfortunately, in those areas was not always flowers and rainbows. So there were those who lifted people up, and I felt that. But there was also those who did very awful things in the name of those buildings. So I was able to sort of repent there and sort of feel that. So it was really weird because I did not want that second thing. Oh, that's what I was looking for. There he is, showing me that new alphabet. All right, so a picture with another guy, Karamoko Alpha. All right, now we get to the third story, because I can't talk about everyone, but it's getting closer to one. All right, so in the Fouta Djallon, I told you guys that they were Nyamakalas and Farbas. Remember those two custodians that were advisors to king? Well, in that area, the very, very first king had an advisor. And that advisor is, of course, it's one of the most well-known in that particular region because his children's trace their lineage back to that first Farba. This is a picture of him, right, in a museum. All right. Ooh boy, ooh boy. I'm just throwing pictures with random elders because I didn't tell their stories, but at least I wanted to show some of their pictures. All right. So I spoke a lot with missionaries before I left. Some missionaries that were there, they were mostly in the city. Not very of them were in the cities where I was going. They were like, it's too remote, people are not receptive to Christ there, so we've given up, we've moved on, right? So I told them, all right, fine, I'll go visit you where you are. So on a trip to go visit a missionary there that had been, somebody had given me their number, Brian Wallace, and they didn't show up. The missionary didn't show up. I was very upset because I had just driven over 3 hours and I was going to drive 3 hours back and this person did not show up. I was torn. It's raining heavily. This guy is on the side of the road trying to start his motorcycle. And we pass him and I look back and I'm like, oh my God, there's absolutely no, even if he starts that thing, there's absolutely no way that he's going to go anywhere, right? I have a higher car so we can manage. So we go back and we get his car in the trunk of in the trunk. This is not a very big motorcycle. I don't want you to picture. I want you to picture the smaller ones. And he takes me to his house. Little did I know. Keep in mind, I'm in a different city. This is not where I am. This is not where I'm going. I'm in a complete different city. This guy is of that line, of that first Farba, of the most important name in the entire Fouta Djallon. This guy, you see this picture right here? This is his direct grandson. This guy is his father's father. And that house, the guest house that I stayed in that night, this guy built it. The guy that I read about in the history books, right? And you see that guitar that he's playing? It's considered to be a World Heritage possession. So you see it in museums and people play like it's protected. Well, I do not know how that happened. I did not plan that. I give a ride to a stranger. He turns out to be the grandson of the first Farba, and I get to hold that thing and play that thing that has been played for generations. So here again, with his entire family there, the Lord builds a relationship with probably one of the most important families as far as oral traditions in that area. And I had nothing to do with it. I went to an appointment. That was my appointment. I just didn't know it. That was my appointment. I just didn't know it. Oh my God. This was amazing. I was trying to figure out how it works.
Zeidi en train de jouer la guitare.
And by the way, this was first played in 1632.
Premier Almami du Fouta, Karamoko
Over
Alpha.
500 years old.
La guitare du nom de Babaoura, datant de 1632, comme vous le voyez à l'intérieur.
And you can read articles about this Baba Uro. I mean, I have a book about it. These are things that I learned about. And I just, at that moment, I could not believe what was going on. Like, I am in a different city, and I did not see this coming. And the conversations that I had with this gentleman were probably one of the most fruitful of the entire trip. Because he connected me with his older brothers, their uncles. So I came back with like incredible material. I gave it back. I was like, I don't want to hurt this thing, you know. And he plays it for me. And they don't do that. They don't just play it for you, right? These people have hierarchical society. They'll play it in a wedding, or they'll play it if they were hired to play it. But he gives me a private sort of showing. I'll stop this here. All right. Last but not least, I get back to the city after a very, very fruitful voyage. Not just in academia, because I met all of these good connections, but the Lord has, in every single person that I've met, not just introduced me to these people, but built relationships in 2.5 weeks. In 2.5 weeks, I cannot believe these people are calling me. We're texting. I'm calling them, hey, how are you doing? When I go back, I'll get to meet with them. I have relationships with these people. This house has relationships with these people. So I get back, and it's the Muslim holiday, the big Muslim holiday, Eid. And I go and I do an IT job for someone on my last day there. And it's really not that complicated. I hooked up a modem and I installed the driver. It's just very typical things that we do here. And this guy hands me 1,200,000 francs. Right? It's not a lot of money, right? Remember, $1 is 9,000 francs. So it's less than $200. It's over $100, right? So, right? And he says, it's Eid. You got to get a lamb, right? Because in Eid, they buy a lamb. That's what they do. They just like Jews. They're commemorating the Abrahamic sacrifice. They get sheep on that day and then they eat. So people that can afford it get to eat lamb. So I have 1,200,000 francs. I buy a lamb that cost, guess how much? 1,200,000 francs. So not a penny less, not a penny more. That was the price. And the people around my grandparents that are generally poor, and this is the elder of that area. Those guys are 2 elders of that particular area. They don't remember the last time they had lamb. You know why? It costs 1,200,000 francs. People make 500,000 francs a month. So I remember people coming around me and saying things like, our hearts are happy because on this day that is very special to us, we're having lamb like our ancestors did. All right? I think it was 20 families that gathered around. I think I had like one chunk, right? But it's not about the amount of meat you eat. It's about the fact that they had lamb like the ancestors did on that day. So one lady comes up to me and she goes, you must be like, you guys, your hearts are always like, that's the way that they described it, like our hearts are happy now. Your hearts must always be happy because you guys have money over there. You probably eat lamb every Eid. And I told them, actually, I don't eat lamb every Eid because I don't sacrifice lamb anymore because Jesus, and you can imagine how I was able to share the story of the lamb that was sacrificed and how I don't need to do this every year because Jesus has already done that for me. So my heart is already happy with or without the lamb. So I was able to share the gospel through this, in this illustration of my heart always being happy because Jesus was sacrificed for me. So my last couple of days there, I was able to share that. Of course, they're Muslims, whether they received it or not. This was an amazing opportunity to share with an example. You see how that makes you happy? My heart is always happy because Jesus died for me. And that's how the trip ended. So, needless to say, I still don't believe it happened. Right? I look at my notes and I'm like, there's no way that this happened. Did this actually happen? When I go back in December, if I go back in December, I'm not going to I actually have relationships with it. I spent a month there. So what the Lord did for me was, and if you want to hear about the academic side, I have so much about those conversations that I had. But as far as the Lord has spoken to me about provision. Pastor Lenny always talks about characteristics of an orphan being, self-promotion, self-protection, self-provision. So the idea that in certain cultures we forget that by us just simply being there, we don't even need to have a plan. Whether it's out here or in Africa, that when we give the Lord our yes, that is provision, whether we see it or not, because we're in Christ and Christ is in us, right? So when we step into their areas of influence, sometimes the Lord's way of loving people through provision is by sending you. So that's the first thing. Don't look for the provision. Sometimes you are the provision. And I learned that. I was the provision. Not what I was looking in my pockets, but me. I was that. Second, I went over there thinking that I was going to share about Jesus. I built relationships. The Lord is saying, for another time, build relationships first. And he started lots of relationships. These people were family to me. There isn't a single kid in any of those households that didn't cry when I left. Now, me too, I'm a kid. So relationships, I learned that when I gave my yes to the Lord, that He was more worried about, not worried, He wanted me to build relationships. And I thought I was going to go over there, I'm going to tell everybody about you. No, I didn't get to explicitly say anything to Him. But in particular moments, they were extremely, extremely fruitful. Never in my life, for as long as I've been a Christian, have I ever been able to help someone accept the Lord. And in one trip that I did not talk to them about Christ, I was able to help 2 people do that and be there as they made that. And the third one was I learned that I'm a control freak. And I think that comes from my engineering side, and that's why I'm studying liberal arts now. I think that I just want everything to just... And I think that my pride gets in the way of that, right? And a couple of people in this audience remind me of that, that I need Christ, right? And pretending I don't need things or I don't need help from people, along the way I was helped by everyone, actually hinders me from my relationship with Christ. Because it puts me in a position where I'm relying on myself and I'm prideful to ask for help. While by opening up and allowing the Lord to bless me through other people and asking for help, I'm also admitting that I need Christ, right? So the idea of control just kind of flipped around its head a little bit. That pride, for me, at least in my life, was there. And that's one of the things that's definitely launched me into dealing with it, amongst other things. So those are the 3 things I think that I bring back. That the Lord provides and that we are His provision to others. Let's invest in relationships. And let's not get in the way of the Lord blessing us in whichever way He decides to do that. So thank you so much for your prayers, for your support. This is just the first trip of many. The Lord has just started way too much, so it's just the first trip of many. So thank you again. For those of you guys who will be watching the video later, I really appreciate your prayers and that coffee date or Skype date if you want to hear more. All right. Thanks. All right. We got 20 minutes. If you have any questions whatsoever, now is the time. Or at a coffee date. I will take questions or comments, for that matter.
When is the book coming out?
You know what? My grandfather said the same thing. Yeah, my grandfather said the same thing.
I'm not joking.
I don't know. I'll think about that. And the academic side of it and on the relational side of it, like a lot of my mentors are saying, you need to publish your SMP. And my grandparents are saying, you need to write a memoir about this. So I think more about that when I'm not beating my head up all the homework that I have to do right now for school. I think when I'm done with school and I can sit and then I think that it's a possibility. Yeah. Mr. Shin? How did I come to know Christ? It has a lot to do with control. Also, I moved here, and I had some Christian friends, two of which are here. So Peter and James knew me prior to me accepting Christ. And I remember one night I was on my knees, and I sort of looked up and I said, if you exist, if you're there, take control of my life. And he did, and I did not like it because things kind of went south, you know. I lost my security clearance, and a whole bunch of things happened. The Lord showed me that, yes, there was something there, that was in control of my life. Of course, he redeemed a lot of that, and I'll be more than happy to give you the longer version. But it was one of those things where relationships with people drew me to question this. Well, these are authentic people. They're either demented or God exists. They don't look like demented people. All right, so maybe I should ask if I should actually really. So it was for me. It was a lot about relationship and that moment where God really took over, because I was one of those people who needed a sign, and I got one. There were lots of dreams and visions also, probably because I come from a culture where we dream a lot, right? So dream and dream interpretations are huge in my culture. So of course the Lord showed up in my dreams. So that's the short version. Yeah.
Do you feel comfortable being back there? Like it's just another trip? This is the family?
So I felt uncomfortable, like I was, for the first time there, I felt like a foreigner. Because the city, I know myself around, I know every place, I have some family. Countryside, I've never been there, right? And people, when they see me, they don't see Ghanaian, they see American, right? They hear that accent. I've been here for long enough to where you guys probably hear my African accent, they hear my American accent. So I can't win, right? So both sides know that there's been some kind of mix of culture. So people can just recognize me. So I think that after day 4 and day 5 and day 6 and day 7, after the fire thing and the man that was schizophrenic and the car, like it's just, by that point I had just given up on just worrying. There was absolutely no way that and when everybody put their money down, they're like, all right, we're going together. I know that you can't afford this, but like we want to be. I think that the first week, and then everything was gone. I was just, the Lord was just taking care of the whole thing. So uncomfortable might not be the word for it, but yeah, in a sense, for the first week. Stella? Re-entry?
Because some people, when they come back, they either just assimilate back into the culture, or they have distance of the culture, or
Yep.
they try to integrate with the cultures.
Yep.
Whether they're up front or when they can see that. So how does that feel?
For those of you guys that are in the same areas, you know my obsession with worship and how I always want to like pull out my guitar. And I'm very disappointed in myself and in the culture that I live in with we don't spend enough time, I think, worshiping and praying. So that's one of the things that has hit me the hardest. Like I said, in flood-looking waters, people are out worshiping and praying. And they don't have a relationship with God. We have a relationship with God. There's no flooding waters. The streets are safe. We have instruments. We have transportation. Where's the call to prayer? Where are the 300 plus on a Friday night? What's happening? So coming back from that place where I saw the devotion of these people, surely misled, but the devotion that they have, that I'm back in a culture where that's just not there, and I miss it. Bethany?
In those places, like you mentioned, in places of freshwater worship,
Mm-hmm.
in which manner do you worship? Like, was it through songs and prayers?
Songs, prayers, all of it, tongues. I just got up there and started worshiping. I have a couple of videos of me singing some songs, and it's just I didn't have my guitar in that water. I didn't have a guitar, but now I'm just going, and I just pray and sing and spend time there. Spend time in places where people have been trained to fear and not go worship there. So in a sense, led the way so that people can do that. I think Kadir is going to go back and worship there. I think he had a good time. So. Going once? All right. Beth?
So do you have expectations or plans already for the moment you're going to be in December?
So December is not really, December is family focused. right? So this trip was not family focused. I saw my mom, I think, twice, my dad twice. That's it. So it wasn't, I did not go over there for family. Family wasn't there. I didn't spend time where family was. So it wasn't, so I feel like my family sort of saw me at the airport and then saw me leave. So I think that December is more personal. And I think that some of those interactions are going to be more personal, right? Because the first time I'm going over there, and of course I'm meeting these people with all these questions, right? So I think that in December, even if I meet with them, and I think I will, it will be on a, hey, I'm just here to spend time with you. So I might go visit people just on a living sort of basis. That being said, next summer, I think that I'm going to do a second part to this, where I'm going to go and try to be, so this trip was sort of half academic, half the Lord, right? So I'm going to go and I'm going to do it personally, and then I think I'm going to either do a full academic or full, I don't know which way the Lord is going to, but I'm going to like focus on both of those. I have a passion for both of those things. Both the academic side, which I think is fascinating, and also the things that the Lord has been talking to me about. So the next summer I go, I think that I'm just going to focus on one of those aspects and go for that. And the Lord has not necessarily been talking to me yet about which way that is. So I'm fully expecting that before then He'll send me the direction that He wants to send me. I don't know. But I do know that I want to go back and not just taste, right, but do more. And I think I intend to doing it over the course of my life. Mr. Marty?
You mentioned the guy that took his hat off.
Mm-hmm.
Would you read into that was, you said that was, he was comfortable with it.
Mm-hmm.
Could you read culturally into that was a sign of equality, that he raised you, that he could take his cap off because you didn't have one, and so he felt you at the same level with him as far as being able to talk and discuss, and from a cultural standpoint, that have a greater meaning than just being relaxed and active.
There might be some truth to that, but for this particular example, I asked him, and this is how. So on the second picture, right here, he has it on, and you see he has a scarf on. So he tells me when we take a picture, he says, "Wait, I want to put my cap on and I want to put my scarf on because I want to look more respectable." So he tells me that. So I know that when he didn't have it on, he didn't feel like he looked respectable. I asked him if I could use the other picture, and he said sure. But for this picture, he insisted. Same guy. This picture was just taken. It was just one evening. You know how you take pictures of the evening. It was just. But as I was leaving, I went through all the pictures. But in this one, he told me, "I want one where I have my cap on." And so this is his role in society. Not everybody wears this. So not every old person has that. Not every man has that. So that is a hufi is a sign of Islamic devotion. Is a sign of leadership. A young person doesn't wear that, so it's a sign of an elder that has some sort of weight. So he wanted people to know that he was a respectable member of that society.
You said that, I'm sorry, you said they were a patriarchal society.
Absolutely.
So this is not being modernistic, but what role do women play?
That's a very good question. That's the second part of mine. You want to meet me for coffee? We can talk more about that. I think that I found that women play a huge role in songs and storytelling. You remember I started with that? I said that, and I wanted to introduce that. So songs, which is a form of storytelling in that culture, are huge. And women play a big role. So while men will give a lot more proverbs, women will give a lot more songs or give a lot more stories. So longer stories, men will give shorter proverbs. But the two serve the same purpose. Of all of those things that I spoke about oral literature. So I found that women are very involved also in the dissemination of oral literature, just in different art forms than the men are.
So they operate like big meters.
I'm sorry?
They operate in a form of bed meters like the Jews did.
I do not know what that word means, so I can't answer that question.
House school where the parents teach the children oral history.
Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely. The man goes to work, mamas with the kids and is responsible for a lot of the raising, yeah. So a child will hear a lot more in his lifetime from his mom than he would from dad. When he becomes a man, then he'll start hearing from dad more. Unless he needs a spanking, then dad's around the corner. Yeah.
So is that distinction between the two types of oral history? Some of it's oral history as well as
Yeah. I just want to say that there are more than those two. Those are just the two that I mentioned.
I just meant, but you're looking at male versus female.
Yeah.
The question I had is that the songs, are they more like narrative, life lesson type, as opposed to moral of the story, which Proverbs usually get straight to the point?
The slide, if I could get to it, I think there's a lag. So I think that all of them from my studies fit these, come on, you can do it, yeah. So all of them are going to fit these functions. So although I have functions of Proverbs here, which is what I studied in depth, I cannot go in depth about songs. I want to do that. Right? I've been talking to Bethany Alvey. Hi, Bethany. But I want to do that. I want to do a trip and not focus on just Proverbs, but look at songs and storytelling also. But what I've learned from my summer research is that oral literature in general will be used for supporting conversations. So in the middle of a conversation, she'll think of a song where a storyline is a particular way and she'll use it. For conflicts, I believe that songs are used for, my grandmother actually has used songs, like where she'll, kind of like tales here or fables, to where someone will give you a fable and then there's a moral at the end. So there are songs that have narratives like that. Also reinforcing customary practices. So there are songs about practices. There are songs about being Guinean, about group identity. There are songs that also teach. There are songs that teach, the days and the month and the alphabets. So songs, I think that they would, to some extent, fit into all of these functions. But again, I want to spend more time on that. Like my focus was not on songs, but hopefully next summer, if I go, I think I'll focus on. I'll do a lot of research on songs. So I'm very interested in songs. Yeah. That's it. All right. Well, thank you for coming. I'm sorry I didn't have snacks for you.
I don't think we need.
Don't want you to come coffee, want you to come for dinner.
Sure.